Hey, everybody. Today we are going to be talking about the thought, emotion, and behavior cycle. So, um, this little picture you're seeing here on your screen is the thought, emotion, and behavior cycle, or the TEB cycle, as I kind of refer to it in our lesson this week. And I'll kind of take you through stage by stage. The overall premise behind this is that a lot of times we get stuck in behavioral patterns that we don't quite understand. And these patterns are highly linked to our thoughts and emotions. Um, and they're often unhelpful, right? So they don't help us solve any of our problems. They don't help us live according to the values that we cherish. And therefore, it could be good if we understood these cycles in ourselves and found a way to address them. So that's pretty much what we're going to be talking about this week. So, just as a description of this slide, actually, I'm going to put the slides in a separate file so you guys can have access to these. And I'll put descriptions, like verbal or written descriptions of each slide in the PowerPoint. Okay, so the first stage of the TEB cycle. Something happens in your life, right? Like this could literally be anything, anything that feels stressful or brings on an uncomfortable feeling or thought that makes us kind of go into avoidance mode. It's different for every person, right? Like every person has a different trigger for what makes them feel like hiding, or what triggers their behaviors in ways that are really not consistent with their values, right? So the example we're going to go with here is that is applicable to most people that are listening to this right now, because you're all students in this class and you probably have some assignments coming up or maybe a big research paper. And for a lot of students, there's a tendency toward avoiding working ahead on projects until the last minute, right? We call this procrastination. It's something that most people do, and it can be very, very problematic for a lot of students or people in general, because we're not able to focus ourselves enough to work on things, to give ourselves plenty of time to complete tasks in a high quality way. So we'll work with this example of a research paper. And so this first slide shows stage one. Anything could trigger those uncomfortable thoughts and emotions, which is stage two. So now you're kind of feeling, you see in your planner or you're looking at the syllabus and you think, okay, I've got a big research paper. It's coming up in about 4 weeks. So there's plenty of time to start working on it. But man, I really, really feel like when I start thinking about this research paper, immediately just feel anxious because, man, I just hate research papers, right? I don't think I'm very good at it, but it stresses me out to think about the process of completing it. I'm afraid I won't do very well, kind of dread the process, or maybe I just really get bored by things like research papers. So maybe boredom is the uncomfortable emotion that you experience in stage two, right? This is the emotional response phase. And usually, along with our emotions come thoughts, right? So the emotion might be anxiety, dread, fear, boredom. But then the thought is the cognitive part of that process, right? Um, so this stage three is the thoughts that are connected to those uncomfortable emotions. And if you're dreading or anxious about the research paper, these kinds of thoughts might go through your head, like, I hate this, I can't do this, research papers suck, I'm going to fail this, it's going to take forever, it's going to be so difficult. And finally, I would rather poke my eye with a fork than to do this research paper, right? So, those might be some of the typical thoughts that people experience when thinking about starting to work on their research papers. Those are the things that might accompany those emotional reactions that you have. So, if those things are going emotionally through your mind and cognitively through your head, what might be your response? When you're feeling bad, when you're thinking negatively, are you likely to sit down and start working on your research paper? No, probably not, because you're human, right? So when those uncomfortable thoughts and feelings come up, almost everyone has the tendency to just run and hide. It's a very natural human response. And um, and it's natural. You don't have to beat yourself up about it, but it's important to understand what's going on here, right? Like, so humans are always looking for immediate gratification to what they're doing, and they want to feel better right away, right? Like, so focusing on the long-term goal of getting the research paper done is not as important to most people as focusing on the short-term goal of feeling better, right? Like not feeling anxious about the research paper, getting rid of all of those uncomfortable thoughts of and anxiety and negativity. And what do most people do? They immediately start to do something to distract themselves or to avoid the task that is triggering those thoughts and emotions in them. So while we can see why this would feel good in the short term, to not feel anxious or stressed about having to work on your research paper, we can definitely see how this is not helpful toward our long-term goals of um, writing a good research paper, getting a good grade on that, getting a good grade in the course overall, being able to pass all of your courses that semester, and then eventually graduating, getting the job of your dreams, right? Like, so I'm assuming that most of you in this course have some kind of a goal or aspiration along those lines. And we've already talked about the values and how our values can be guiding our behavior, but there's not really any value guiding this behavior, right? So like if you say, okay, when faced with my research paper, I usually procrastinate by watching TV or taking naps, like just almost doing anything except working on that research paper. How would that be consistent with your values, right? Nobody has the value. I don't think so. Nobody's core value is to be the best procrastinator they can be, right? That would be super silly. Um, and nobody's core values are like, I want to give the least amount of effort in my work. I want to get the very minimal grades to scrape by, and I don't want to do my best or put forth my best effort. Most people wouldn't say, you know, that's a core value for me. That's not really like a positive, ideal way to live, right? Like most people would say, yeah, my values toward being a student are to do my best to achieve the highest grades that are possible for me to achieve, and to learn and gain knowledge from this process, to be a reliable student, things like that, right? So running and hiding from your research paper, that's in no way consistent with the values that you might really want to live by as a student. So you can see why this pattern isn't helpful in the long run, right? Because what happens once you have um, once you have reached stage 4 and you're doing these things that are like procrastinating and just watching TV instead of working, does that actually help you um, really resolve the feelings that you might have about your research paper? Absolutely not. It's going to only make those feelings worse once it's 3 days before your paper is due and you've procrastinated so much that now you have to freak out and stress out. It makes those emotions about the research paper 100 times worse, rather than if you could have started 4 weeks ago and motivated yourself to live by your values and go ahead and just start the very basic minimal things that you needed to do to get that research paper started, right? How much better would you have felt? That would have been something that you could feel good about living in consistently with your core values. So a lot of people, when they think about this cycle, and you might be thinking of examples from your own life on how this cycle plays out for you, because it's not just about schoolwork and research papers, right? Like it could be any pattern of behavior that you've noticed. So this could be like, um, let's say you have kind of like a tense relationship with your mom or dad. Um, and every time you interact with them, it triggers some sort of like negative emotional state for you. And you end up just avoiding them, or you end up getting into a fight with them, whatever it is that is in response to those emotions and thoughts that you have that are triggered by interacting with that parent. When you think about your values, you know, you probably don't have the value of in your relationships, I want to be highly irritable and aggressive, and I want to yell a lot and be sarcastic, right? Like nobody probably would say those are my core values. You might um, you might think I would like to be able to be patient and compassionate and logical and not fly off the handle when my mom or dad does something irritating to me, right? Those are the things that you might like to do, but a lot of times we just feel stuck in the cycle. Most times we don't even know the cycle is happening or why it's happening, right? It's just kind of it's a pattern. It happens without even us observing it for the most part. It's automatic and it just kind of like goes on autopilot. But the important thing to notice is that the cycle is actually not you. Your thoughts and emotions are not you, who you are as a person, right? Like there's a part of your mind that exists and is able to observe the cycle happening, right? Even if it's just right now, maybe this is the first time you've really realized that there's a cycle like this happening for you. That is the part of you that is able to observe the cycle. Now, it's not easy to always be in that middle circle and observe the cycle because you feel like the little circle of you is kind of like caught in a whirlpool and just being dragged down to the bottom, right? Like you have no control over it. But some of the things that we will learn this semester are how you can start to gain more awareness of that cycle, and you can start to learn how to do some things that can change that cycle for yourself so that you don't have to just always be in that death spiral of negative behaviors, negative emotions, negative thoughts. um, it doesn't always have to be this pattern. You can do things to change it. And one of the things starts with being aware of those values that you have, and the things that you ideally would like to have guide your behavior. And then comparing that to what actually is guiding your behavior. Is avoidance a huge part of the way you behave? Do you have a lot of behavior patterns like this that kind of run on autopilot? And if so, building awareness of those things is really the first step to addressing them. Um, for example, um, in terms of your values, one thing you can kind of do is make a commitment to live by your values and make a conscious, intentional effort to always be reminding yourself of the kind of person you want to be, right? And when you feel that avoidance coming on, right? Like when you feel like, oh, I don't want to do this research paper. I'm just going to go watch TV and forget about it. You might tell yourself, I deserve a break. I've been working so hard. I have plenty of time to do this paper. Once you're aware of this cycle, those are the kinds of thoughts and avoidance behaviors that you're going to have over and over. And you know where that leads, right? It leads to panic 3 days before the research paper or the day that the research paper is due. And you know what that cycle looks like. So, what can you do instead? Um, when you start feeling those uncomfortable feelings, fear, anxiety, dread, low motivation, when you start feeling those come up, you can commit to taking an action, right? So, like the moment you feel anxious about working on your research paper, sit down to work on it for 15 minutes. That's all you have to commit to is just doing one little part. So, break your ultimate research paper. Like, you don't have to like sit down and start writing your research paper, but maybe you're gonna do a Google search of one article that you could use. Or you could just even decide on a topic for your paper. Okay, like what do I want to write this research paper about? And then once you've got your topic, you can stop. But more likely than not, once you've got yourself over that hump of actually starting to work on it, it won't be as bad as you had been thinking about it in your mind and feeling about it. So you might even like push yourself a little bit farther. Now you've got your topic. Well, let's do a couple of like psych info searches or database searches to see what kinds of research articles exist on this topic, right? So it may get easier and easier as you keep working on it, once you've kind of gotten yourself over that hardest part of getting started. And that's the way that we can change these cycles of behavior, right? Like you probably won't be able to control whether the emotions come up. You probably won't even be able to control what kinds of thoughts you have, right? But you can control how you respond behaviorally to those thoughts and emotions. And the first response and the response that you're probably used to is letting those thoughts and emotions really drag you down, attaching to those thoughts and emotions, and making those things your absolute reality so that you really don't have any choice but to get away from those as fast as you can. Or another choice would be to engage, take a step back, and realize, okay, I'm prepared for this cycle. I know my typical response, the things that I feel and the things that I think typically when faced with this situation. Like I've thought about this before, and I know that my knee jerk reaction will be to go watch TV or to look at my phone or to go get a snack, anything that will keep me from having to think about this research paper. I know that's what I'm going to do, but instead I'm going to try something different, right? I'm going to try sitting down and just forcing myself to work on it, no matter how I feel, no matter what my thoughts are. I'm going to take some deep breaths and just do it, right? There's nothing stopping me physically from just doing it. And then maybe the pattern will change a little bit, right? Like, so maybe um, it's 4 weeks out from your research paper and you force yourself to sit down and think of a topic and find a couple of articles, and wow, that wasn't that hard, right? Like you spent maybe 30 minutes working on it or an hour, and you've already got a good little bit of action toward your ultimate goal, right? And so how much easier will that be for you over the next 4 weeks to keep working in little chunks over time? And then at the end of it, you won't have that huge panic, because you'll already have a good portion done by the time that paper gets to be more um, more like intensely on your radar, right? As something that's coming up very soon. So, making room for those uncomfortable thoughts and feelings, realizing that it's not actually going to like kill you to feel anxious or distressed about something. Those are just thoughts and feelings. They aren't necessarily real, and they're definitely not helpful. So the more you can disengage from those kinds of thoughts and feelings and focus on your values and how you want to behave ideally, the more you're going to be able to start breaking down these patterns of unhelpful behaviors. All right, so that's the last slide. And this is the kind of thing that you're going to be practicing in your reflection journal this week. And then in your small group discussion for this week, you will be talking through some of those behavior cycles with your small group members. And then together, you're going to come up with a goal. So once you've recognized a pattern within your behavior that you would like to change, that you think would be helpful to your overall success and your happiness in your life, that would help you live more according to your overall core goals, or I mean, your core values, then you're going to set a SMART goal. And you'll see more videos about that. And then you will you'll set yourself a goal related to this behavior cycle. So be looking for that assignment here. And yeah, that's the end of this video.